September 1940. The swastika flies over Paris, Oslo, and Warsaw. The impenetrable Maginot Line has been bypassed, and the British Army has been driven into the sea at Dunkirk, leaving their heavy equipment to rust on the French sands. To the world, it looked like the end. Adolf Hitler stood on the cliffs of Calais, staring across a mere 21 miles of water at the white cliffs of Dover. He held the most powerful land army in human history. Behind him, the Luftwaffe prepared to rain fire. The plan was codenamed Unternehmen Seelöwe, Operation Sea Lion. The objective? The total elimination of the United Kingdom as a base of military operations. The occupation of London. The end of the British Empire.
Was Nazi Germany's codename for their planned invasion of the United Kingdom. It was to have taken place during the Battle of Britain, 9 months after the start of the Second World War. Following the armistice with France after the Battle of France, Adolf Hitler, the German Führer and supreme commander of the armed forces, hoped the British government would accept his offer to end the state of war between the two. He considered invasion to be a last resort, to be used only if all other options had failed. As a precondition for the invasion of Britain, Hitler demanded both air and naval superiority over the English Channel and the proposed landing sites. The German forces achieved neither at any point of the war. Further, both the German High Command and Hitler himself held serious doubts about the prospects of success. Nevertheless, both the German Army and Navy undertook major preparations for an invasion. These included training troops, developing specialized weapons and equipment, modifying transport vessels, and the collection of a large number of river barges and transport ships on the Channel coast. But as the barges gathered and the paratroopers checked their chutes, a terrifying realization began to dawn on the German High Command. They were about to attempt something they were fundamentally unprepared for. They were about to gamble the entire fate of the Third Reich on a river crossing across the most treacherous stretch of water in the world. Today, we dive into the files of Operation Sea Lion. We'll explore the secret weapons, the bitter infighting between Hitler's generals, and the cold, hard mathematical reasons why, even if the Luftwaffe had won the Battle of Britain, the invasion of England was almost certainly a suicide mission.
It's a common misconception that Hitler spent years dreaming of invading Britain. In reality, in the summer of 1940, he was a victim of his own success. The fall of France happened so fast that the German High Command, the OKW, was caught completely off guard. They had no landing craft. They had no doctrine for amphibious warfare. In fact, Hitler actually hoped for a negotiated peace. He admired the British Empire. He saw the British as Aryan cousins who should be helping him fight Russia, not resisting him. But Winston Churchill had other plans. On July 16, 1940, after Britain ignored his peace offers, Hitler issued Führer Directive
Number 16. It began with these words: "As England, despite her hopeless military situation, still shows no signs of willingness to come to terms, I have decided to prepare and, if necessary, to carry out a landing operation against her." But there was a catch. Actually, 4 catches. The RAF had to be beaten down to the point where they couldn't stop a crossing. The English Channel had to be swept of British mines, and the Strait of Dover blocked by German ones. The coastal zone had to be dominated by heavy German artillery. The Royal Navy had to be too busy elsewhere to intervene. The man tasked with making this happen was Grand Admiral Erich Raeder, head of the Kriegsmarine. And Raeder was terrified. During the invasion of Norway just months earlier, the German Navy had been mauled. They had lost 2 light cruisers and 10 destroyers. By the time Sea Lion was being planned,
Raider only had 1 heavy cruiser, 2 light cruisers, and 4 destroyers available for action. Against them, the British home fleet, a leviathan of battleships and dozens of destroyers. To Raider, sending a fleet of river barges into the channel was like sending sheep into a wolf den. If you want to know why Sea Lion failed before it started, look no further than the War of the Generals. The German army, led by Franz Halder, wanted a broad front invasion. They wanted to land 13 divisions in the first wave, stretching from Ramsgate all the way to the Isle of Wight. They pictured it like a massive river crossing, something they were good at. Raider, the Navy man, nearly had a stroke when he saw the Army's plan. He told them, "I can't protect a front that wide. It's impossible." He demanded a narrow front, huddling the troops together so his few remaining ships could try to shield them. The Army's response, "A narrow front would be a death trap. We'd be slaughtered on the beaches." Enter Hermann Goering, the flamboyant head of the Luftwaffe. Goering was a man of immense ego who promised Hitler that his planes could solve everything. "Give me 2 to 4 weeks," Goering claimed, "and I will wipe the RAF from the sky. The Navy won't even be needed." This infighting meant there was no unified command. Unlike the Allies at D-Day 4 years later, who had a supreme headquarters, SHAEF, to coordinate everything, the Germans were 3 different services playing 3 different games. The invasion would focus on 4 beachheads. Beach B, Folkestone to New Romney. Beach C, Rye to Hastings. Beach D, Bexhill to Eastbourne. Beach E, Beachy Head to Brighton. But even this refined plan was a logistical nightmare. What was the great German armada actually made of? It wasn't purpose-built landing craft like the Higgins boats we see in Saving Private Ryan. The Germans spent the summer of 1940 frantically rounding up river barges from all over Europe. These were flat-bottomed boats designed for the calm waters of the Rhine, not the choppy, unpredictable swells of the English Channel. They modified them by cutting ramps into the bows, but they were slow, unmaneuverable, and most importantly, terrifyingly vulnerable. The Army wanted to land 138,000 men in the first 2 days. To do that, they needed thousands of these barges. But every barge taken from the Rhine was a barge taken away from the German economy. They were literally strangling their own industry to build a fleet that might sink if the wind blew too hard. The Germans did get creative, though. They developed the Tauchpanzer, a submersible tank. These were Panzer IIIs and IVs waterproofed with rubber seals and long breathing hoses. The plan was to drop them off ships near the shore, where they would drive along the seafloor and emerge from the waves like mechanical monsters. It was brilliant engineering, but it relied on one thing: a perfectly flat seafloor. If a tank hit a hole or a large rock, the crew was essentially in a steel coffin. On August 1st, 1940, Hitler issued Directive Number 17, Operation Eagle Attack. The Luftwaffe was to overpower the RAF in the shortest possible time. The Germans were still losing planes at an unsustainable rate. Even if the Luftwaffe had destroyed the RAF, they still couldn't stop the Royal Navy. The Luftwaffe had a terrible track record against moving warships. During the evacuation of Dunkirk, despite total air superiority, they only managed to sink 5 out of over 40 British destroyers present. The British had nearly 800 small coastal craft, motor torpedo boats, and gunboats, specifically designed to shred unarmored barges. The Luftwaffe didn't have armor-piercing bombs for naval targets, and their pilots weren't trained to hit fast-moving ships in a zigzag pattern. In the words of Admiral Karl Donitz, "We possessed neither control of the air nor the sea, nor were we in any position to gain it." By September, the clock was ticking. The English Channel is notorious for its autumn storms. If the invasion didn't happen by the end of the month, the weather window would slam shut until 1941. On September 14, 1940, Hitler held a meeting. The Luftwaffe hadn't broken the RAF. The RAN was still reporting that the Royal Navy was waiting in the wings. The British had been busy too. They had laid thousands of mines. They had moved their mobile reserves, including the 1st Canadian Infantry Division, into position behind the south coast. They had even prepared flaming sea defenses, pipes filled with oil along the beaches that could be ignited to turn the surf into a wall of fire. On September 17, 1940, Hitler made the call. Operation Sea Lion was postponed indefinitely. The massive collection of barges in the French ports began to disperse. The elite paratroopers were reassigned. Hitler's eyes shifted away from the white cliffs of Dover and towards the vast frozen plains of the east. He decided that if he couldn't defeat Britain directly, he would destroy their potential ally, the Soviet Union. This decision would eventually lead to Operation Barbarossa and the ultimate downfall of the Third Reich.
So, what would have happened if they had tried? In 1974, military historians and veterans from both sides conducted a famous war game at the Royal Military Academy, Sandhurst. They used all the real data from 1940. The result? The Germans managed to land a small force, but within days, the Royal Navy surged into the Channel and cut the supply lines. The German troops in England, unable to get food or ammunition, were forced to surrender. Operation Sea Lion wouldn't have just been a failure, it would have been a massacre of Germany's best soldiers. In the end, the English Channel proved to be a moat that even the Nazi Blitzkrieg couldn't cross.
If you enjoyed this deep dive into the invasion that never was, hit the like button and let me know in the comments. Do you think Hitler ever seriously intended to go through with it? Or was it all just a psychological game to force Churchill to the table? I'm Said Ibrahim, and thanks for watching.